Hey everybody, today's video, again, a little bit different. Not that I'm giving up on Dorico, but I wanted to show you some of the workflow I've been doing. I reorganized my studio so I could have this lovely saxophone wall in the back there and a few Godzillas thrown in just for fun. But we're going to be working today with Logic Pro and some of the software plugins that I use. One of the things I do outside of just music notation is I do a lot of recording, mixing, mastering, and obviously performing as well. And so I want to share with you some of the tips and tricks I've found to recovering some audio. So today is all about using RX11 by Izotope to recover a piece of audio that otherwise would be lost. We've all been in the situation where we started a recording and it was less than ideal and we got flying through and we realized we messed something up and we got extensive bleed and things just really weren't working. And that's what happened to me. I've been working on a new EP that'll be coming out in December, and we were recording at one of the musician's house. He has a couple of great grand pianos there. And so we threw up some mics, threw up some blankets, but the bleed in the piano was just unusable. It was just terrible. And so what we needed to do was figure out a way of recovering that audio so we don't have to re-record everything. Now, fortunately, all the other parts are in pretty good isolation, but it's nice to know that we can actually do this. So the tool we're going to use today is RX11 by Izotope. I really like Izotope's plugins. I think they sound great. I think they work awesome. And they offer a lot of flexibility and they offer a lot of high quality. And RX is a great way of recovering audio. One of the best on the market, frankly speaking. And so if you have access to RX, here's some great things you can use specifically for helping music, because a lot of the tools in there are for video production, but this one really works great in music. So let's dive in and see what we can do to rescue this piano part here in RX11. Okay, so I'm sporting these great headphones today because I don't really have a way of isolating the audio from what you hear so that we can hear the same thing but also not have it bleed all over into my vocal mic. And so we're going to go ahead and work with the headphones today. So I've got up this project of a recording I did of Isn't She Lovely? And this is a really great song. I've always really loved it. And the problem is the piano part was just coated in bleed from the drum set and from the saxophone. Now we DI'd the bass, so there's no bleed there, but we really wanted to try and save this piano part. So if you hear, this is the result of doing the RX, and you can hear it sounds pretty darn good. Now, I've already mixed and mastered all of this, so the sounds you're hearing have plugins and everything, but let me show you what it sounded like before I did that. So I'm going to go down here, and on Logic, I'm going to go into my track alternates, and I'm going to go into the track alternate that had the original audio, unaltered by RX. Okay, so now, if I bring up the audio and play it back, you're going to hear there's a lot of extra garbage in the piano part. Hear that echoey drum part bleeding through? So let's isolate that piano part for a second so I can show you what I mean. So that's what the audio sounded like right out of the box. And as you can tell, it just kind of sounds like an echo chamber. It's just a terrible version of the whole band. And so what we wanted to do is get more isolation of the piano part and far less of everything else. So what I did is I took it into RX to try and remove some of that extra music bleed from the drum set and from the saxophone. So to begin with, what I did is I assigned RX as my audio editor in Logic. So if you go up under your settings and you go to audio, you'll see there's a tab for file editor. and then I set RX as my default file editor. Now, you wouldn't necessarily have to do it this way, but the reason I did it this way is because it allowed me the opportunity to go ahead and make it so that there's a quick shortcut to get right to this file, because I'm going to do it quite a few times. So if I highlight this piece of audio here to go ahead and edit it, if I hit Shift W, it opens it in the editor. So you can see it fires up RX, and now we have just our one file, and I can go ahead and play it back. So there's a couple of tools here we have at our disposal. The first one, and the one that we're going to use to get rid of the drums, is called Music Rebalance. And the Music Rebalance gives us 4 options to try and rescue things. You can rescue the voice or turn down the voice to make, say, a karaoke track. You can alter the amount of bass you're getting, and you can remove or add it. You can remove or add drums, and then it has a category for other. So if I click on that button here in RX, you can see it brings up this interface. And the interface gives me lots of options of what to do. And again, you have what to do with voice, bass, drums, and other. Now, unfortunately, if you're working in instrumental music, piano and saxophone kind of belong in the other category, so it's hard to isolate, but the drums definitely will come out of here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this back to my default, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn down the drum track a little bit, say 10 dB. Now, you could crank it all the way down to nothing, but I find that it leaves behind a lot of artifacts, and I'm trying not to really affect the sound, because then it starts to sound a little plasticky. I just want to see if I can tamp the drums down so that there's less of it in the recording. So from here, I could just hit the play, and you'll hear what it originally sounded like. But if I hit preview here, now it's going to start the playback using the plugin. So you can hear it cut the drums out a lot, and it really brought it down to a manageable level for mixing and mastering. And that's really all I wanted. I didn't necessarily need it to do crazy things to try and get rid of everything. I just wanted to tamp it down just a little bit. So from here, what I can do is just hit Command A to select everything, and then I can go ahead and hit Render, which will write it into the file itself. Now, as you saw when we were doing the preview playback, it takes a moment for Music Rebalance to load. It has a lot of AI, it has a lot going on. So depending on your computer, it may or may not be able to render terribly quickly. And you can see from the progress bar there, it's going to take a while for it to actually render the changes. That's why this tool is so powerful and works so incredibly well. And I've used this to great effect, not only on this piano part, but also in horn parts and other things. So you just have to be a little bit patient, but it'll definitely reward you. So we're going to sit back and relax, and in 2 minutes and 27 seconds, we'll have some results.
Many unbearable hours later.
All right, now the render is finished, so this part of the removal is done. And so on just the left side of the piano mic, because I did record it in stereo, we have removed out about 10 dB of drums, which is quite a bit realistically. And so we can go ahead and close this. Now, one of the nice things about RX is it does preserve a lot of these settings, and so when we go to change the right side, this will come up for us automatically, which is pretty great. So I'm going to go ahead and close this window. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to do something about the saxophone bleed. Now, the saxophone bleed is a little harder to get out, but RX does have a good tool for that, which is called debleed. First thing we need to do is go back over to Logic, and we need to bring in the sax part from this exact same recording so we can use it as a reference. So I'm going to go ahead and click back over to my Logic project. I'm going to highlight my sax part, and then again I'm going to hit Shift W, and it will open it in RX. Now, we're not actually going to change the sax part because the bleed in the sax part was relatively negligible. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back over to our piano part here, and we're going to click on the de-bleed tool. Now, the first thing you're met with here is it asks for the source track. Now, this is the thing that we're trying to cut out of what we're looking at. So the source is the sax part because we're trying to remove it from our piano part. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the sax, and then you're going to hit learn. Fortunately, this one goes pretty fast.
A few moments later.
Okay, now we are met with a window that shows us our bleed source. This is the spectral graph of the bleed, and then we also have the active track, which is the one we're removing from. And then we have two options down here. We have artifact smoothing, and we have the reduction strength. So the reduction strength is how much is pulled out, and then the artifact smoothing is how jagged it leaves behind. So basically what's going to happen is if you see this colorful spectral graph here, what RX is going to do is basically punch out any spot where the sax was interfering with the piano. And the reason that we need the artifact smoothing is, just like you might imagine, if I just took and I punched out a bunch of holes, it's going to look kind of ragged. And so that kind of smooths it over to give it a more polished sound. However, it typically dulls the sound quite a bit. So you have to ask yourself what you're willing to do. Now, to be clear, this tool works pretty well, but there's a couple of caveats. One of which is, if you turn up the reduction too much, it's going to make your original sound pretty darn weird. So here it is with no reduction. Okay, sounds pretty nice. Now let me go ahead and do full reduction and full smoothing. So you can hear it sounds a little funny. It sounds a little processed, and it's maybe not as clean as we'd like it to be. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to lower down this number. And I had it about 3.5 when I did this previously. So you can hear it kind of takes the edge off the sax, but it doesn't quite squish it so much. And that kind of gentle smoothing is really nice, and it sort of keeps everything sounding much more authentic and much more natural. Now you can see, if I take your artifact smoothing way down, you can see this is going to make it sound really jagged and very 8-bit computery. There's that whim, I don't know, it sounds like drowning in a digital swimming pool. I don't even know how to describe that sound, but it's terrible. And on this recording, I found I really needed all the smoothing I could get to make it sound okay. Now, a piece of advice for both the music rebalance and this tool. A, you want to test with your sensitivity settings. If you remember in the music rebalance, there was this sensitivity knob down here on the bottom, and it is going to decide how much drums and how kind of precise it surgically takes it out or not. And you definitely want to experiment with that before you render it. And you also obviously want the highest quality. I couldn't imagine doing it at low quality because you need it. And the same is true here. Test out lots of different options with that artifact smoothing. In this case, I did that for you and I realized I wanted full. But you want to do as little as you can to make sure that you preserve as much of the original as you can so you don't lose the sparkle. Because what I typically find is it gets kind of mumbly when you're doing these kind of processes. So we want to make sure that we're not removing any of the good sound. So we've now gotten that. I can go ahead and highlight and we can hit render again.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
All right. So from here, we're left with a pretty clean version of our piano part. And like I said, I can't really get rid of the drums, and I can't really get rid of the sax, but I can make it to be at a tolerable level so that it feels like it's not just like totally overwhelming. Because what I find is, if you keep turning up that oversaturated part, it's just like turning up a terrible version of something you're already hearing too much of anyway. And so it's nice to be able to back that down a little bit. Now, you could just save right now and overwrite your original file, which is what would happen if I went up and went File Save. But because I never like to get rid of my originals, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go under File and I'm going to hit Export, because I want to export this as a separate WAV file. And so when I hit Export, you can see it's going to ask me what file format I want, and then it's going to ask me the bit depth. Now, when you do this, it's going to preserve your frequency rate, 44.1, 48, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't have to worry about that part. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it at 32-bit float so we get as much information as we can in there. And so then when I hit OK, I go ahead, I'm going to save this in the same folder where all of the source audio from this recording session is, so that it's all in one place. And then I'm just going to give it a new name. I'm going to say this is Music Rebalance, and then I'm going to call it 01, just so I can find it again when I need to add it to my track. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit Save. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to undo the changes I made to this track to put it back to original, and then I'm going to close it. Because that way the original is still preserved, but I have created a new version that I can put into my mix to make it sound good. So let's go ahead and bring in the other piano channel, and we're going to go ahead and run those same exact processes. So I'm going to go back to Logic here. So the first one I changed was piano high. So now we're going to go ahead and change piano low. So again, I've already set my editor. So I'm going to click on the region that I'm wanting to edit. I'm going to hit Shift W to open the editor, which is going to bring the file here into RX. Now I'm going to click on the Music Rebalance. And you can see it preserved the setting I used on the last one, which is great because I want to do the same thing. And so I go ahead and I leave this here at the -10 sensitivity, best, and I'm going to go ahead and select the whole thing, and I'm going to hit render.
2 very boring minutes later.
Now, while this is rendering, those of you who use other DAWs can get access to some of these features using the ARA plugin, meaning it can actually run this simultaneously in the DAW. Unfortunately, in Logic, though, ARA is not supported by Izotope plugins right now if you have an M1 or higher Mac, which I do. And I also find that it's really, really problematic to use those on-demand plugins. It really can make my document unstable, and if there's anything that ever is going to crash a Logic project, it's one of those plugins. So I typically like to do this outside of Logic and then make a new file because I think it's a little safer and it prevents me from having to have quite so many plugins open all at the same time. Now in Pro Tools and other things, there are special plugins and shortcuts that'll get you straight to RX, which is a really great feature that I hope Logic one day incorporates. But this isn't too bad since it's just a Shift W, it opens it up, and then any changes you make when you save it, it's going to put it right back into the file for you, so your mix will be right there ready to go. So if you were making a minor change that you knew you absolutely wanted to keep, you could just hit save and close RX and it will be reflected in Logic. Again, because I'm completely changing the original file, I wanted to have a backup copy. So again, this works in any DAW in any situation. Like I said, I'm just happening to be using Logic right now to get there. 1 minute and 14 seconds.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Okay, now that Rebalance is done, I can go ahead and close that, and I'm going to go open up the D-Bleed again. Now you can see that the D-Bleed already has my sax part brought in, because remember, I didn't close the sax one, and since we're using the same source for the bleed, that was just a handy feature. Again, RX is really good about remembering a lot of these things, which is, again, really handy. So we go ahead and hit Learn. All right, now that the debleed has done the learn, we can go ahead and run the render. Now, I know it's going to work with these settings because I've previously done it and we tested it on the last one. But again, if you found that you didn't need as much bleed reduction on this microphone, you could go ahead and alter these settings, and it's just dependent on your sound source.
12 seconds later.
Okay, now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go under File, and I'm going to export again. And I'm going to bump out that WAV file at 32-bit. And again, this one, I'm going to call that the Music Rebalance 01. Save. Then I'm going to go ahead and undo all of the things that I've done to bring it back to where it was open. And then I'm going to go ahead and close both files and quit out of RX. Now, back here in Logic, we can go ahead and insert our altered tracks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my piano high. Under the track menu, I'm going to go down and I'm going to make sure that I have Show Track Alternates checked on, because we need to see that there are track alternates. And you can tell that there's track alternates because there's this little letter and these up and downs. Now, if I hadn't made a track alternate yet, so for example, if I made a brand new track on the bottom here, you can see that those little up and down arrows, that's how I can get to the track alternate menu. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on those little arrows and I'm going to do a new track alternate. And then now I have a blank space. I'm going to go ahead and bring my playback to the beginning and I'm going to drag in that file. So I'm going to go to the spot on my hard drive, and what I did is I went to the location where all these are saved and I right-clicked on the name of the Logic file, and I said Show Package Contents. Then I went to Media, Audio Files, and look at that. There are all my files. Now I have it sorted by when it was added. I added it today, so that's what I need. And you can see I'm working with the high, so I'm going to go ahead and grab piano high, and I'm going to bring it down and place it right there in the space. And then here, I'm going to go ahead and do a new track. And I'm going to go back to my window, and I am going to add in the low. And so now, if we hit playback, you'll hear that we've removed a lot of that bleed. Now you might say to yourself, wow, when you solo it, there's a lot of kind of digital yuck back there. And that's true. Anytime you do one of these audio edits, there's going to leave behind some trace that you edited the file. But fortunately, when you listen back, there's hardly anything there. It really doesn't have a lot of stuff that's in the way. It feels pretty nice, and it kind of disappears into the background because it's covered up by all the other instruments. And again, if I was to go in here and I was to choose you can hear how roomy and echoey it is. And now it's just much cleaner and easier. So again, using Logic, using RX, we're able to rescue this recording, which otherwise I would have had to have redone. Now, there's trade-offs for sure, but I sent it to the piano player and he thought it sounded pretty darn amazing. And so it's a great tool to have, because if you work with musicians who maybe aren't local and by the time they get home you realize there's a problem, at least now you have a way to deal with it. Again, RX is a product by Izotope, and Apple Logic is obviously made by Apple. If you want to check it out, go ahead and go to their website, izotope.com. This is not a sponsored video or anything, but I'm all about sharing anything that's going to make your workflow better and easier. And I really think that this is a great way of helping when you have one of these kind of problems. So I hope you're enjoying the video. If you are, please like and subscribe the channel. It really helps me out. I'm really trying to get up to my number of 10,000. With every passing day, I just get that much closer to the number of subscribers. And if you have anything you're hoping to learn more about, whether it be Dorico, Logic, or anything having to do with music production, shoot me a comment, ask me a question. You can also visit my website, larsonjazz.com. I do private Zoom lessons, and I can give you some assistance if you need anything, as well as custom engraving work, mixing, mastering, and the whole shooting match. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you the next time.